Rain hammers against bulletproof glass 80 floors above Seattle, and inside a fortress of steel and secrets, a criminal empire is dying. $10 billion. Vanishing. Screen by screen, server by server, like blood draining from a body no one can save. The Red Death, that's what they're calling the skull icon, pulsing on every monitor, mocking them, devouring everything Lim Yujun has built. 20 mercenaries stand frozen, useless, while their king watches his throne turn to ash. Yujun doesn't shout. He doesn't rage. He's perfectly, terrifyingly still. That's how you know someone's about to die. The elevator dings, a cheerful sound in a room that smells like ozone and terror. She stumbles out, dripping, shivering. Eva Morris, a delivery girl in a cheap yellow jacket that's seen better years, holding a bag of spicy noodles like an offering to gods who don't deserve mercy. She's exhausted. 3 jobs, no sleep, hands calloused from labor no one sees. But when she lifts her eyes and sees the Red Death bleeding across the screens, something shifts in her expression. Not fear, recognition. "You're killing yourselves," she says quietly. That's not an attack. That's a suicide protocol. And in that moment, standing in a room full of killers, soaking wet and holding takeout, Eva Morris becomes the most dangerous person in the building. What happens next will bind her to a monster, trap her in a golden cage, and force her to choose between saving her brother's life and losing her own soul. This is a story about genius and obsession, about power that corrupts and love that destroys, about a delivery girl who walked into hell and decided to rule it. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. No one laughed. That was the first sign Eva had made a mistake. In her exhausted, rain-soaked delirium, she'd expected mockery, disbelief, maybe a security guard dragging her back to the elevator, but the room had gone silent in a way that made her skin prickle. Lim Yujun turned from the window. She'd seen his face before. On her phone, in the news feeds she scrolled through during her 3rd shift at the convenience store. The demon of Seattle, head of the Gumryong Syndicate, a man who'd built an empire on violence and code. But the photos didn't capture the weight of his presence, the way he moved through space like gravity bent around him. He looked at her the way a wolf looks at something it hasn't decided whether to eat or keep. "Say that again," he said softly. Eva's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to apologize. Bo, back into the elevator and pretend this never happened. But she'd spent 12 years being invisible, ignored, dismissed. 12 years watching her mother fade in a hospital bed she couldn't afford. 12 years knowing her brother would die for a crime he committed to save her. She was so tired of being invisible. "It's a recursive overflow loop," Eva said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Someone hard-coded a logic bomb into your security protocol. It triggered when you initiated the international transfer. The system thinks every incoming connection is a threat, so it's locking itself down infinitely. You can't break it from outside. You have to rewrite the bridge protocol from inside the architecture." Yujun took a step closer, then another, until she could see the gray of his eyes, cold as winter steel, and smell the rain-soaked night clinging to his suit. "And you know how to do this." It wasn't a question. "I wrote the original code," Eva whispered. 5 years ago. At MIT. Before I was blacklisted. Before," her voice caught, "someone stole my work. Corrupted it. That's your security system. A bastardized version of something I built." Something flickered in Yujun's expression. Not kindness. Recognition. The way one weapon recognizes another. He turned to his head of security. "If she moves wrong, shoot her in the leg. Keep her alive." Then he looked back at Eva, and for the first time since she'd walked into this nightmare, she saw him smile. It was a terrible smile, beautiful and ruthless. "Fix it," he said. You have 69 minutes. If you succeed, I'll give you anything you want. He leaned in, his breath warm against her cold skin. If you fail, you'll never leave this building. Eva should have been terrified, should have run. Instead, she walked toward the console, set down the bag of noodles, and rolled up her sleeves. I'll need access to the mainframe, she said. And someone better get me coffee. This is going to take all night. Behind her, she heard Eugene laugh, a sound like breaking glass. I think I'm going to keep you, he murmured. Eva's fingers moved across the keyboard like they were born there. Each keystroke was surgical, deliberate, beautiful in its violence against the corrupted code bleeding across the screens. She didn't think. Thinking would remind her where she was. In a room full of men who killed for less than breathing wrong. Thinking would remind her that a gun barrel kissed the base of her skull, cold metal pressed against skin still damp from rain. So she didn't think. She just typed. The code architecture spread before her like a language she'd forgotten she knew. Jagged arrays nested inside recursive loops, each one strangling the next, creating an infinite cycle of self-destruction. Amateur work. Vicious work. Someone had taken her original MIT thesis, the security protocol she'd designed before they blacklisted her, before they stripped her name from every patent and weaponized it into something monstrous. Her hands didn't shake. They should have. 3 days without sleep, 2 meals in 72 hours. Her body running on fumes and fury and the desperate knowledge that failure here meant Leo died tomorrow at dawn. But her hands stayed steady, rewriting reality one command at a time. Behind her, she felt Eugene watching. Not like the others, not with skepticism or mockery, or the particular disdain men reserve for women they've decided don't belong. He watched her the way a collector watches a rare painting, hungry and possessive and already calculating ownership. The first screen flickered. Green code bloomed like spring after nuclear winter. Then another. And another. The server stacks hummed back to life, a sound like resurrection, and Eva felt something crack in her chest. Not relief, but something darker. Pride, the savage satisfaction of proving every person who'd ever dismissed her catastrophically wrong. Transfer resuming, someone whispered, voice threaded with awe and terror. 99.2%, 99.5, 99.8, transfer complete. The words hung in the frigid air like a verdict. Eva sat back, her fingers finally still. She'd done it. Saved $10 billion for a man who probably used that money to buy countries. Her vision blurred at the edges, exhaustion finally allowed to surface now that the crisis had passed. She turned in the chair, legs unsteady, and found Eugene standing closer than she'd realized, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Those cold gray eyes that reminded her of winter storms over the Pacific. 5 stars, she said, her voice rougher than she intended. Please, I need the bonus. His expression didn't change, didn't soften, but something shifted behind his eyes. Some calculation recalibrating as he looked at her. Really looked at her. Not at the cheap yellow jacket, or the braids frizzing from humidity, or the exhaustion carved into her face like scars. He looked at her the way he'd looked at the code, like he was seeing the architecture beneath the surface. Eva tried to smile, tried to take a step toward the elevator, tried to remember how legs worked. The room tilted. No. She was tilting, falling. The adrenaline that had kept her upright evaporated all at once, and her body decided it was done, finished, empty. The marble floor rushed up to meet her. Strong hands caught her before she hit. Eugene moved faster than a man his size should move, sliding one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees, lifting her like she weighed nothing. And maybe she didn't. Maybe 3 years of skipping meals to pay her mother's medical bills had hollowed her out until there was nothing left but stubbornness and code. Her head lolled against his chest. Through the expensive fabric of his shirt, she felt his heart beating, steady, unhurried, a rhythm that said he'd never panicked in his life. Stubborn, he murmured, but there was something in his voice that wasn't quite irritation. Reckless. Eva wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she wasn't reckless, She was desperate, and there was a difference. But her tongue felt thick, her thoughts scattering like smoke. The last thing she registered before darkness took her was Yoo-jun's voice, quiet and absolute. "Lock the doors." "She doesn't leave." Silk against her skin woke her. Eva's eyes opened to amber light filtering through what looked like liquid gold. For 3 heartbeats, she didn't remember where she was. The sheets beneath her were softer than anything she'd ever touched, the mattress cradling her body like water, and the air smelled faintly of sandalwood and something darker, more dangerous. Then memory crashed back. The penthouse. The code. The monster who'd caught her when she fell. She sat up too fast, head spinning, and realized 3 things simultaneously. 1. Her wet clothes were gone. In their place, she wore a silk robe that whispered against her skin like a promise or a threat. 2. Her phone sat on the nightstand beside her, screen dark but somehow menacing in its presence. 3. She was trapped. The room was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. All clean lines and muted luxury. The kind of space designed to make you forget you're in a cage. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Seattle bleeding rain and neon into the night. A door led to what she assumed was a bathroom. Another door, heavy and probably locked, led to whatever waited beyond. Eva reached for her phone. It unlocked without her passcode. Her stomach dropped. He'd been through it, through everything. Her messages to Leo's lawyer, her bank statements showing $37.19, the hospital bills she couldn't pay, the eviction notice she'd been ignoring. Every desperate, humiliating piece of her life laid bare. She should have been furious, should have been terrified. Instead, she felt weirdly calm, like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing you've already fallen. The fear becomes irrelevant. Eva stood, tightening the robe's belt, and walked toward the heavy door. It opened before she could touch it. The office beyond was darker than she remembered, lit only by the glow of monitors and the city burning beyond the windows. Yoo-jun sat behind a massive desk, perfectly composed, eating her delivery, the spicy stew she'd brought hours or days ago. She'd lost track of time. He looked up as she entered, and something in his expression made her pulse stutter. Not anger, not even surprise, just a predatory patience, like he'd been waiting for prey to wake so the hunt could properly begin. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Eva considered refusing, considered running for the elevator, for the stairs, for whatever exit this glass fortress had, but her legs felt like water, and more importantly, she knew with bone-deep certainty that running would only make things worse. She sat. Yoo-jun set down his spoon with deliberate care. He touched something on his desk, and the monitor to her left flickered to life. Code. Her code. The fix she'd written to save his empire, displayed line by line like evidence. "You're very talented," he said quietly. His voice carried no warmth, no inflection, just statement of fact. "The IT department at MIT must have been devastated when they lost you." "They didn't lose me," Eva said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. "They erased me. There's a difference. Because you stole proprietary code. Because I refused to let a professor take credit for my thesis." The old anger sparked in her chest. "Because I had the audacity to say no to a man who thought my work belonged to him." Yoo-jun's expression didn't change, but his eyes, those winter storm eyes, sharpened with something that might have been respect. "And yet," he said, spinning the monitor toward her, "your code is here. In my system. Modified. Corrupted. But unmistakably yours. Tell me, Eva Morris, how does a delivery girl's architecture end up protecting a criminal empire?" The way he said her name made her skin prickle, like he was tasting it, learning the shape of it in his mouth. "I don't know," she admitted. "I wrote that protocol 3 years ago. It was supposed to be for cybersecurity firms. After MIT blacklisted me, I assumed it died with my career. It didn't die." Yoo-jun leaned back in his chair, a predator at rest. "It evolved. Someone stole your work, sold it on the black market, and I purchased it 2 years ago for $8 million. It's been the foundation of my network security ever since. $8 million. For code she'd written in a dorm room on stolen coffee and desperation. Then tonight," Yoo-jun continued, his voice dropping lower. Your code tried to kill me. The Red Skull virus locked down every system the moment we initiated Operation Hydra. 20 minutes before you arrived, we were minutes from complete collapse. Eva's throat tightened. I know you didn't. He pulled up another screen. This one showed code she recognized but hadn't written. A corrupted version of her recall protocol, twisted into something venomous. This wasn't an attack from outside. It was a logic bomb, planted by someone inside my organization. It was designed to trigger during the most critical transfer and destroy everything. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But here's what's interesting, Yujun said, standing. The air in the room shifted, growing heavier as he moved around the desk toward her. The virus didn't just crash the system. It searched for something, and when you walked into this building with your phone in your pocket, it found it. Eva's pulse hammered in her throat. Found what? Yujun stopped in front of her chair, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze, close enough that she could smell the rain still clinging to him, the expensive cologne failing to mask something darker underneath. Leather and smoke and violence. You, he said simply. The system recognized its creator. Your phone carries a ghost partition, a fragment of the original source code you couldn't bring yourself to delete. A digital heartbeat. But your code knew you. It tried to sync with you. That's why it crashed. Your architecture was trying to come home. Horror and understanding crashed over her in waves. I didn't hack you, she whispered. Your system recognized its mother. Exactly. Yujun's lips curved. Not quite a smile. More like a wolf baring its teeth. Which means you're not just talented, Ava. You're dangerous. You built something that recognizes you on a cellular level. Something that will only fully function in your presence. He leaned down, hands bracing on the arms of her chair, caging her in. His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the flecks of steel in his gray eyes, the slight scar cutting through his left eyebrow. You built the lock, he murmured, his breath warm against her cheek. Now you will be the key. Eva's heart slammed against her ribs. She should push him away, should demand he let her go, should remember that this man was a monster who'd built an empire on blood and fear. Instead, she met his gaze and didn't flinch. What do you want from me? Yujun straightened, pulling his phone from his pocket. He touched the screen, and the monitor to her right flickered to life. Leo, her brother, sat in a cell barely large enough to breathe in, his head in his hands, looking smaller and more broken than she'd ever seen him. The timestamp read 3 hours ago. The location marker read Supermax, Death Row. Something inside Eva's chest cracked open. I know everything about you, Yujun said, his voice quiet and absolute. Your brother, Leo Morris, 29 years old. Convicted of cyber terrorism for selling military-grade hacking tools to international arms dealers. Death penalty. Execution scheduled for sunrise, 36 hours from now. Eva couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the image of Leo in that cell, waiting to die for a crime he'd committed to save her. I know your mother is in Harborview Medical, stage 4 cancer, $37,000 in debt. I know you work 3 jobs and still can't make rent. I know you haven't slept in 72 hours because you've been taking double shifts to pay Leo's lawyer, who, by the way, is planning to quit your brother's case tomorrow. Each word was a knife, precise and devastating. I know, Yujun continued, that you are brilliant and desperate and standing on the edge of a cliff with nowhere left to fall. He set his phone on the desk and looked at her. Really looked at her, with an intensity that felt like being flayed open. So here's what's going to happen, Eva Morris. You caused $10 million in damages tonight. The delay, the panic, the near collapse of the most important deal of my career. By any reasonable calculation, you owe me. I saved your empire, Eva shot back, anger finally breaking through the fear. You did, Yujun agreed. Which is why you're still breathing. But you also broke it in the first place, even if unintentionally. The scales aren't balanced. He moved back to his desk, pulling out a sheet of paper. Actual paper, heavy and cream-colored and clearly important. You have 2 choices, he said, setting it in front of her. Choice 1. You walk out of here. I have my people delete your signature from your phone. You go back to your 3 jobs and your dying mother and your brother's execution. And in 36 hours, Leo dies. And you spend the rest of your life delivering food to people who will never see you. His voice dropped, soft and lethal. Or choice 2, you stay. You work off your debt by managing my servers, my security, my digital empire. You become my personal architect. And in exchange, I use every resource I have, legal and otherwise, to keep your brother alive. I have judges on my payroll, prosecutors who owe me favors, evidence that can disappear. Within a week, I can have Leo's execution indefinitely postponed. Within a month, I can have his case reopened. Within a year, I can have him walking free. Eva stared at the contract. Because that's what it was, she realized. A devil's bargain written in legal language and bound in blood. You want me to work for you? She said slowly. I want you to belong to me. Yujun corrected. Your mind, your skills, your complete loyalty. You'll live here. You'll answer only to me. You'll build me an empire that even God can't hack. He leaned forward, gray eyes boring into hers. And in return, I'll give you the one thing you can't buy, steal, or code into existence. I'll give you your brother's life. The room felt like it was closing in, the silk robe suddenly too tight, the air too thin. How long? Eva managed to ask. How long what? How long do I belong to you? Yujun smiled. A real smile this time. Beautiful and terrible. Until you pay off $10 million at minimum wage rates. My accountant calculated it. Approximately 18 years. 4 months. Eva's world tilted. Or, Yujun continued, his voice softening into something almost gentle, almost kind, until you stop wanting to leave. Whichever comes first. He slid a pen across the desk toward her. Choose, Eva. The cage or the cliff. Salvation or execution. Me or oblivion. Eva looked at the contract, at the pen, at the monitor still showing Leo in his cell, waiting to die because he'd loved her violently enough to damn himself. She thought about her mother, dying by inches in a hospital bed, about the eviction notice, about 3 years of being invisible, dismissed, erased. She thought about the way Yujun had caught her when she fell, the way he'd looked at her code like it was art, the way he'd said her name, Eva Morris, like it meant something. This was a trap, a golden cage, a beautiful prison. But it was also the only way Leo lived through Friday. Eva picked up the pen. If I do this, she said quietly, if I sell myself to you for 18 years, I want one thing added to the contract. Yujun raised an eyebrow. You're not in a position to negotiate. Neither are you. Eva met his gaze, steady and unflinching. You said it yourself. Your system needs me. It recognizes me. Without me, your empire is vulnerable. So yes, I am in a position to negotiate. Something flickered in Yujun's expression. Surprise, maybe, or admiration. What do you want? When this is over. When Leo is free and my debt is paid, whether that's 18 years or 18 days, you let me walk away. No hunting me down. No revenge. No pulling me back into your world. You let me disappear. Yujun was quiet for a long moment, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't quite solved. Then he nodded slowly. Agreed. When the scales are balanced, you're free. He pulled out his own pen and wrote the clause at the bottom of the contract in dark, heavy strokes. Then he signed it. Your turn, he said, sliding the paper toward her. Eva looked down at the contract one last time. At the cage she was choosing. At the devil's bargain that would save her brother and destroy her freedom. She pressed pen to paper and signed away her life to the demon of Seattle. Yujun took the contract, folded it carefully, and placed it in his desk drawer. When he looked up at her again, his expression had shifted. No longer the predator evaluating prey, but something more complex, possessive, pleased. Welcome to the Gumryong Syndicate, Eva Morris, he said softly. Your room is prepared. Your computer is being set up as we speak. Tomorrow, you begin. Tonight, He gestured toward the door. Tonight you sleep, because starting tomorrow, you're mine. Eva stood on shaking legs. She wanted to say something defiant, something that would remind him she wasn't broken, wasn't owned, wasn't his. But the truth was simpler and more terrible. For 18 years, or until she stopped wanting to leave, whichever came first, she was exactly that, his. She walked toward the door, the silk robe whispering against her skin like a promise. She could feel his eyes on her back, tracking her movement with that same predatory focus. At the threshold she stopped. "You, June," she said without turning around. "Yes?" "Thank you for not letting Leo die." Silence, heavy and loaded, then soft as a prayer or a threat. "Don't thank me yet, Eva. You don't know what I've saved you for." The door closed behind her with a sound like a cell locking. And Eva Morris, former MIT prodigy, current delivery girl, walked into her golden cage and wondered when, if ever, she'd want to leave. 2 weeks in the penthouse, and Eva had learned the rhythm of captivity. Wake before dawn, code until her eyes burned, eat meals she didn't taste, sleep in silk that felt like accusation. Repeat. The server room had become her kingdom, a glass-walled sanctuary where the only sound was the hum of machines and the rain that never stopped falling on Seattle. June had given her everything she needed. 6 monitors, a quantum processor that made her MIT setup look like a children's toy, access to systems that could topple governments, and coffee. He brought her coffee every morning at 6. She didn't know why that detail mattered, but it did. The way he'd appear without sound, set the cup beside her keyboard, always black, always scalding hot, and leave without a word. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her work, standing in the shadows like a ghost, his eyes tracking the movement of her hands across the keys with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The dynamic between them had shifted into something she couldn't name, something dangerous. She was the only person in the organization who spoke to him without deference, the only one who'd argue when his orders made no technical sense, the only one who'd seen him lose control, that moment when he'd caught her, held her like she was something precious instead of something owned. He fascinated her. God help her. The monster fascinated her. The way he moved through space with that predatory grace. The way his voice could shift from silk to steel in a single syllable. The way he looked at her sometimes, not like she was a possession or a tool, but like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve, and she terrified him, though he'd never admit it. She could see it in the way he watched her code, the way he stood closer than necessary when reviewing her work, the way his voice dropped an octave when he said her name. She held power over his empire in a way no weapon ever could. Every server, every transaction, every secret depended on her skills now. It should have made her feel powerful. Instead, it made her feel trapped in a web neither of them had meant to spin. Tonight, the penthouse was quiet. June's men were scattered across the city on operations she didn't ask about. Park Jin-ho had nodded to her on his way out, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable 2 weeks ago. Even the security detail had learned to give her space when she was deep in code. She sat alone in the server room, surrounded by the blue glow of monitors, chasing ghosts through encrypted files. Leo's court case. She'd been avoiding it for 2 weeks, afraid of what she'd find. But the not knowing was worse than any truth could be. The nightmares had been getting worse. Dreams where Leo stood in an execution chamber, looking at her through the glass, mouthing words she couldn't hear. Dreams where she typed and typed, but the code never worked, never saved him, never changed anything. She needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed her. Eva pulled up the sealed records using June's admin access. Started with the obvious, the arrest report, the evidence logs, the prosecutor's timeline. Standard procedure. Everything looked clean on the surface. Too clean. Then she went deeper, followed the money. Financial records were always where the truth hid, buried under layers of legitimate transactions and shell companies. And there it was. A wire transfer buried so deep only someone who knew what to look for would see it. 5 years ago, January 15th, $150,000. Sender, An offshore account linked to an international arms dealing network that had been flagged by Interpol 3 years later. Recipient: Eva Morris. Payment notation: educational services rendered. Eva's hands froze on the keyboard. Her vision tunneled. No, that wasn't possible. Leo had told her it was a scholarship, a last-minute grant from some tech foundation that had seen her work. He'd been so happy when he called, his voice bright with relief, saying she didn't have to drop out, didn't have to give up her dreams, didn't have to come home and work at the convenience store with him. She'd believed him. God, she'd been so relieved she hadn't questioned it. Hadn't wondered why a foundation would pay full tuition for a sophomore with good grades but no published papers, no patents, nothing that would normally attract that kind of money. With shaking hands, she pulled up the evidence files from Leo's conviction, found the cyber terror code he'd been accused of selling, looked at the architecture, the signature, the timestamp. The code had been written in December, 5 years ago, 1 month before her tuition payment. She compared it to Leo's other work, old projects she'd helped him with when they were teenagers, teaching each other to code in their mother's tiny apartment while she worked double shifts at the hospital. The signature matched, the style matched, the specific way he nested loops and handled error exceptions. It was all Leo. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard, but tears came anyway, hot and furious and devastating. Leo hadn't been framed. He'd built that code, built a weapon that had killed 17 people in a drone strike gone wrong, and sold it to dealers who used it for massacre. He'd done it knowing exactly what it was, what it would become, what it would cost. He'd done it for her. The sob came from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd kept locked down for 2 weeks of playing the composed genius, the valuable asset, the girl who'd signed away her freedom without breaking. She shoved back from the desk, the chair skidding across the floor, and stumbled toward the balcony doors. She needed air, needed space, needed anything but the truth glaring at her from those screens. The balcony doors opened silently. Everything in Yujun's fortress opened silently, like the building itself was complicit in secrets. The rain hit her like punishment, cold and relentless, soaking through her thin shirt within seconds, plastering her braids to her skull. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white against the steel, and let herself break. 17 people. She'd looked up their names once, late at night when she couldn't sleep, when the weight of Leo's conviction had felt like drowning. A father of 3, a college student, a grandmother. Real people with real lives, all ended because her brother had needed money and someone had been willing to pay for death. And she'd taken it. Taken the tuition and the opportunity, and built a life on blood money without ever knowing. Had walked through MIT's halls feeling grateful, feeling blessed, feeling like finally something had gone right. Leo had sacrificed his soul so she could chase her dreams. Had damned himself so she could be brilliant. Had murdered 17 people, men, women, children she'd never met, so she could have an education. The guilt was suffocating. The rain wasn't cold enough to wash it away. Nothing would ever be cold enough. You'll catch pneumonia. Yujun's voice cut through the rain, low and close. She didn't turn. Couldn't bear to look at him while her face was doing this. Crumbling, raw, honest, while she looked weak instead of valuable. But he moved beside her anyway, close enough that his body heat radiated through the cold, close enough that she could smell leather and smoke, and that expensive cologne that always made her think of dangerous things. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just stood there in the rain like it was the most natural thing in the world for a Mafia boss to get soaked on a balcony at midnight. "You found it," he said. Not a question, a statement. Like he'd known all along what she'd discover, had been waiting for this moment. He wasn't framed. Her voice broke on the words, fragile as glass. He did it. All of it. For me. Yes, the confirmation was worse than the discovery. Made it real in a way the evidence hadn't. 17 people died because of code my brother sold, because I needed tuition money, because I wanted to go to MIT and change the world and be someone. She laughed, and it came out jagged, broken. I am someone. I'm the reason 17 people are dead. 17 people died because arms dealers weaponized technology, Yujun corrected quietly. His voice held no judgment, no comfort, just cold fact. Your brother pulled the trigger, but he didn't aim the gun. The dealers chose the targets. They planned the strike. They executed the mission. Don't carry their blood when you're drowning in your own. Eva finally looked at him. Rain streaked down his face, darkening his hair, plastering his shirt to his chest. He looked different out here. Younger somehow. More human. Less demon. The city lights reflected in his gray eyes, turning them silver. How can you say that so calmly? She demanded. How can you just... She gestured helplessly, water flinging from her hands. How can you live knowing the things you've done? The people you've hurt? How do you sleep at night? Jun's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something old and tired and resigned. Something that said he'd asked himself the same questions 1,000 times and stopped looking for answers. Because in this world, Eva, love is just another form of violence. He moved closer, and she should have stepped back but didn't. Your brother loves you violently. He would burn down cities to keep you safe, would sacrifice his humanity to give you a chance at yours, would kill 17 strangers so one person, you, could live the life he thought you deserved. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed rain from her cheek, a touch so gentle it felt like blasphemy from hands that had killed without hesitation. Accept it, he murmured. The guilt won't bring those 17 people back. Hating yourself won't undo what your brother did. Destroying yourself won't save him. All you can do is decide what you do with the life he bought you. Whether you waste it on guilt, or whether you make it worth what he paid. Eva's breath hitched. She should pull away. Should remember that this man was a monster, that his touch was poison, that every moment she spent in his orbit dragged her deeper into darkness she'd never escape. Instead, she leaned into his palm, just slightly, just enough to feel the calluses on his fingers, the warmth of his skin against her rain-cold face. How did you know? She whispered. That night. The delivery. How did you know I'd be the one to deliver your food? Something flickered in Jun's expression. Not quite a smile. More like acknowledgement of a secret finally spoken aloud. His thumb traced her cheekbone, slow and deliberate. His eyes held hers, gray and storm-dark and absolutely steady. I hacked the Bolt Eats dispatch system 6 months ago, he admitted. His voice was quiet, intimate, the kind of confession that should have terrified her. Tracked your route patterns. Knew which shifts you worked, which neighborhoods you covered, how long each delivery took you. I built an algorithm to predict your movements. Eva's heart stopped. Started again. Harder. You've been watching me for 6 months? I've been hunting you for 3 years. His voice dropped lower, became something darker. Ever since I traced the original code architecture back to an MIT thesis written by a student who'd been erased from every database. Someone brilliant enough to build what I needed, dangerous enough that someone wanted them disappeared. I knew whoever built my system was valuable, irreplaceable, and I knew I'd need them eventually. He leaned in, his forehead nearly touching hers, his breath warm against her rain-cold skin. The space between them felt charged, electric, like the air before lightning strikes. I didn't expect you to be you, he murmured. Didn't expect you to look at me like I was human instead of monster. Didn't expect to want to keep you for reasons that have nothing to do with code. Eva couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the feeling of his hand on her face, his body close enough to feel the heat of him, his voice wrapping around her like silk and smoke. Eugen, the alarm screamed through the penthouse, shattering the moment like glass. Eugen pulled back instantly, his expression shifting from dangerous intimacy to lethal focus in a heartbeat. He grabbed Eva's wrist, not rough but firm, pulling her inside, away from the exposed balcony, away from windows that suddenly felt like vulnerabilities. What is that? She demanded, stumbling after him as he dragged her toward the server room. Breach alarm. His voice had gone cold, professional. The man who'd touched her face with devastating gentleness had disappeared, replaced by the demon of Seattle. Someone's inside our network. Eva's mind shifted into combat mode automatically. She dropped into her chair before he'd released her wrist, fingers flying across the keyboard before she'd consciously decided to move. The screens lit up with red warnings, cascading failures, systems hemorrhaging data like arterial bleeding. "This isn't random," she said, tracking the intrusion vector, watching the attack patterns ripple through their defenses. "They know our architecture. They're using our own protocols against us. They're inside our security, using my code to break my code. Can you stop it?" "I'm trying." Her fingers froze. Her blood went cold. "Yujun, the signal. It's not coming from outside. It's bouncing through a satellite relay. Trace it." She did. Followed the digital breadcrumbs through layers of encryption, through proxy servers and ghost networks, through security that should have been impenetrable. The path twisted and doubled back, designed to confuse, to hide, to make tracing impossible. But Eva had written half this architecture. She knew its weaknesses better than whoever was attacking knew its strengths. The source address appeared on screen, and Eva's world tilted. Washington State Supermax Prison, Cell Block D, Death Row, Leo, she whispered. The name came out broken. Yujun's expression went absolutely cold, not angry. Anger was too hot, too human, too emotional. This was something else, something that made trained killers flinch and hardened criminals confess. This was the face of a man who'd built an empire on calculated brutality. He pulled out his phone, made a call. His voice was clipped, precise. "Get me everything on Silas Vane, the tech governor, employment history, financial records, known associates, properties, family, everything. I want it in 5 minutes." He hung up, looked at Eva with eyes that had gone from storm gray to steel. "Your brother isn't working alone," he said quietly. "Someone's using him. Someone with access to government resources and the technical infrastructure to hide a black site operation inside a federal prison." Eva's hands shook on the keyboard. Vane, the prosecutor, the one who pushed for Leo's execution, who denied every appeal, who is running a cyber warfare operation using condemned prisoners as slave labor. Yujun's voice was deadly calm. "Your brother isn't attacking me because he wants to. He's attacking me because if he doesn't, Vane will execute him early. Or worse, Vane will kill you." The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Leo's code. The execution date suddenly pushed forward by 6 months. The way the attacks had started exactly 2 weeks ago, right after Eva had signed her contract with Yujun, right after her name had appeared in his system. "He's trying to destroy you to get me out." Eva realized, the horror of it settling in her chest like lead. "He thinks if your empire falls, you'll let me go. He's trying to save me by attacking the one person keeping him alive." "He's wrong." Yujun moved to her console, his hands bracing on either side of her chair, caging her in. His presence was overwhelming, heat and danger and absolute certainty. "I don't let go of what's mine. Ever. Not to governors, not to brothers, not to God himself." He pulled up a program Eva had never seen before, his fingers moving across the keyboard with the same lethal precision he brought to everything. The screen filled with data. Offshore bank accounts, property records, investment portfolios, all linked to a single name, Silas Vane. "What are you doing?" Eva asked, watching numbers cascade across the screen. "Calling Vane's bluff." Yujun initiated something labeled Vampire Protocol. On screen, the numbers in Vane's account started dropping. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. Every second, money bled from Vane's carefully hidden accounts into digital void, disappearing like it had never existed. Yujun picked up his phone again, dialed a number that appeared on screen beside Vane's name. The call connected. Eva could hear someone answer, hear the confused, "Hello?" "Governor Vane," Yujun said. His voice was pleasant, conversational, the tone someone might use discussing weather or sports. It was absolutely terrifying. "I hope I'm not calling too late. I'm watching your net worth drop by $10,000 per second. Quite fascinating, really. In 5 minutes, you'll lose your Swiss villa. In 10, your daughter's trust fund evaporates. In 30, you'll be filing for bankruptcy." Eva could hear shouting on the other end of the line. Threats, legal language, the panicked fury of a man watching his world burn. Eugene's smile was a knife's edge. Every second you keep Leo Morris locked in that cell, you lose a luxury car. Every minute, a property. Every hour, a legacy. Your beach house in Malibu? Gone. Your wife's jewelry collection? Liquidated. Your son's college fund? Vanished. TikTok governor. How much is your revenge worth? More shouting. Demands to know who he was. Threats of FBI involvement. Promises of prosecution. Let me make this simple, Eugene continued, his voice dropping to something soft and lethal, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. You have two choices. Release Leo Morris into my custody immediately, or I drain every account, destroy every asset, and expose every illegal operation you're running inside that prison to every news outlet in the country. CNN, Fox, The Times, The Post. They'll all receive detailed documentation of your black site coding operation, complete with prisoner testimonies and financial trails, the transfer or the truth. You have 60 seconds to decide. Silence on the other end. Then grudging, defeated. The transfer will take 72 hours to process legally. You have 12. Eugene hung up. He looked at Eva, his gray eyes unreadable in the monitor glow. Your brother will be here by Friday, he said quietly. And then we're going to have a conversation about loyalty, love, and what happens when you attack what belongs to me. Eva should have been grateful. Should have thanked him for saving Leo, for using his power to do what she never could. Instead, all she could think was that she'd just watched Eugene destroy a man's life in 3 minutes flat, using nothing but code and cruelty and the kind of casual brutality that came from never questioning his right to violence. And the most terrifying part? She'd found it beautiful. Friday arrived wrapped in rain and violence. The dockyard stretched along the industrial waterfront like a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and forgotten dreams. 3 a.m. No witnesses, just the sound of water slapping against rotting pier posts and the distant wail of a cargo ship somewhere in the fog. Eva stood beside Eugene's Maybach, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She'd changed out of the silk prison Eugene dressed her in, back into jeans and a jacket that felt like armor, like the girl she used to be before she signed her life away. Eugene stood 5 feet away, perfectly still despite the cold. He'd worn all black tonight. No expensive suit, no silk tie, just tactical gear that made him look like what he was. A predator preparing for war. Park Jin-ho and 6 other men formed a perimeter, their hands resting on concealed weapons. The air tasted like salt and diesel, and the particular electricity that came before bloodshed. The armored transport appeared through the fog like a ghost. Black, unmarked, bulletproof glass. It rolled to a stop 50 feet away, engine idling, headlights cutting through the rain. Eva's breath caught. This was it. Leo. After 5 years of prison, of death row, of watching her brother disappear behind concrete and steel, he was here. The back door opened. Leo stepped out slowly, like his legs had forgotten how to work. He was thinner than she remembered. His prison jumpsuit hung off his frame, bright orange against the darkness. His wrists were cuffed in front of him. His face. God, his face looked older, carved hollow by guilt and time. But his eyes, when they found Eva across the dock, his eyes were the same as they'd always been. Warm, protective, full of a love that had damned them both. Eva didn't think, didn't wait for Eugene's signal or permission or tactical approval. She ran. Leo, her brother's face cracked into something between a smile and a sob. He stumbled forward, chains clinking, reaching for her with cuffed hands. The crack of the rifle shot split the night. Leo's leg exploded. Blood sprayed across wet asphalt. He went down hard, his scream cutting through Eva's chest like a blade. Leo! Eva was still running, still closing the distance, her mind screaming that this was wrong, that Vane had agreed to the transfer, that this was supposed to be safe. Then she saw it. The red dot, dancing across Leo's chest where he lay bleeding, moving, rising, settling on her own chest like a brand. Time slowed to syrup. Eva heard Yoo-jun shout her name, heard Park Jin-ho yelling orders, heard the unmistakable sound of weapons being drawn, but all she could see was that red dot, that tiny point of laser light that meant someone, somewhere in the darkness, had her heart in their crosshairs. Yoo-jun moved. He didn't run, didn't shout, just stepped in front of her with the kind of casual certainty that said he'd calculated this moment, prepared for it, expected it. The second shot rang out. The bullet hit Yoo-jun's left shoulder, spinning him around. Blood bloomed across his black shirt, dark and wet and terrifyingly real. He staggered but didn't fall, didn't make a sound, just turned back to Eva with eyes that burned like winter fire. "Get down." Then chaos erupted. The armored transport's side doors burst open. Men in tactical gear poured out, not prison guards, mercenaries. They moved with military precision, laying down covering fire as they grabbed Leo's broken, bleeding body and dragged him back toward the van. Yoo-jun's men returned fire. The dockyard lit up with muzzle flashes, the sound deafening, echoing off metal containers. Eva stood frozen, watching Leo disappear back into captivity, watching blood pour from Yoo-jun's shoulder, watching their carefully laid plan crumble into violence and betrayal. "Eva!" Yoo-jun's voice cut through her paralysis. He grabbed her arm with his good hand, his grip iron despite the blood soaking his sleeve. "Move." They ran. Park Jin-ho was already at the Maybach, engine roaring. Bullets sparked off the armored car's body as Yoo-jun shoved Eva into the back seat and dove in after her. The door slammed. Tires screamed against wet asphalt. The dockyard disappeared behind them in a blur of rain and gunfire. Eva's hands were shaking. No, her whole body was shaking. She turned to Yoo-jun, saw him slumped against the leather seat, his face pale, his shoulder bleeding through his shirt in a spreading crimson stain. "You're hit." Her voice came out strangled. Oh God, you're bleeding." "Flesh wound." Yoo-jun's voice was tight with pain but steady. The vest caught most of it. Eva didn't think. She grabbed the hem of her shirt and tore, ripping fabric until she had a strip long enough to use. She pressed it against Yoo-jun's shoulder, and he hissed through his teeth. "I need to stop the bleeding." Her hands moved on autopilot, medical knowledge from a dozen late-night internet searches when she couldn't afford to take her mother to the ER. "Hold still." "Eva." Yoo-jun's good hand caught her wrist. His fingers were warm despite the blood loss. "I'm fine." "You're not fine." The words came out as a scream. "You got shot. You stepped in front of a bullet for me. You—" Her voice broke. "Why? Why would you do that?" Yoo-jun looked at her, his gray eyes hazy with pain but absolutely fierce. His hand came up to cup her face, leaving a smear of his own blood on her cheek. "You are my architect," he said quietly. "Nobody breaks my things." The words should have been insulting, should have reminded Eva that she was property, a possession, something owned, but the way he said it, the way he looked at her, like she was more valuable than his empire, more precious than his life, made it sound like a vow, like a promise written in blood. Eva pressed the makeshift bandage harder against his wound, her hands still shaking. "You're insane. You could have died." "So could you." Yoo-jun's thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle despite the violence still ringing in her ears. That was unacceptable. The Maybach raced through Seattle's empty streets, rain hammering the windshield. In the front seat, Park Jin-ho spoke rapidly into his phone, coordinating with the other vehicles, already planning their next move. But in the back, in the dark, Eva and Yoo-jun existed in a bubble of leather and blood, and something that felt dangerously close to devotion. "Vane set us up," Eva whispered. "He never meant to let Leo go." "No." Yoo-jun's voice was cold now, the pain sharpening him back into the demon everyone feared. "He used your brother as bait. Wanted to kill us both, eliminate the threat, and keep his operation running. He miscalculated. Leo's hurt. They shot him. He's alive." Yoo-jun's certainty was absolute. Vane needs him. Leo is his best coder, his most valuable asset. The leg wound was meant to stop him from running, not to kill him. "Then what do we do?" Eva demanded. pressing harder as fresh blood seeped through the fabric. How do we get him back? Yujun's smile was a knife's edge, beautiful and terrifying. We stop asking nicely. The penthouse had transformed into a war room. Maps covered every surface, guard rotations, prison blueprints, thermal imaging of the Supermax facility. Yujun had called in every favor, hacked every database, pulled every string to build a complete picture of Vane's fortress. Eva sat at her console, working despite exhaustion, despite the blood still staining her hands. She'd cleaned and wrapped Yujun's shoulder herself after they'd returned, using supplies from a medical kit that had been suspiciously well stocked. The bullet had gone through cleanly, missing bone and major arteries by inches. He'd refused a hospital, refused painkillers, just sat still while she stitched him up with hands that shook less than they should have, then stood and started planning their assault. Now, 12 hours later, Yujun leaned over the main table, his wounded shoulder barely slowing him down. Park Jin-ho stood to his right. 4 other men Eva had learned to recognize, Kwon, Min, Sung, and Park's brother Jae-ho, formed the rest of their assault team. And across the table, arguing loudly, stood Lim Tae-hyun, Yujun's younger brother, second in command, a man Eva had barely spoken to in her 2 weeks here, who'd watched her with cold calculation like he was waiting for her to fail. "This is suicide," Tae-hyun said, his voice sharp. "You want to assault a federal prison for a delivery girl and a convict? You'll bring the entire government down on us." "The government is already involved," Yujun replied calmly. "Vane is government. His operation is government-sanctioned. We're not breaking new ground here. You're wounded. You should be resting, not planning an operation that will get us all killed." Tae-hyun's eyes flicked to Eva with undisguised contempt. "All this for her? You've known her for 3 weeks. She's not worth your empire." The room went silent. Yujun straightened slowly, his gray eyes going absolutely cold. "Say that again." Tae-hyun seemed to realize he'd crossed a line, but pride or stupidity made him push forward. "I'm saying we should cut our losses. The girl's brother is already as good as dead. Let Vane have him. We focus on securing our operations, not throwing them away on, get out." Yujun's voice was quiet. "Lethal, brother. I said get out. You're not part of this operation. You'll stay here and maintain our standard defenses. That's an order." Tae-hyun's jaw tightened. For a moment, Eva thought he might argue further, but something in Yujun's expression, something that reminded everyone in the room exactly who the demon of Seattle was, made him back down. "Fine." Tae-hyun grabbed his phone from the table. "But when this falls apart, don't say I didn't warn you." He stalked toward the elevator. Eva watched him go, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. The way he'd looked at her, the way he'd argued, the particular venom in his voice when he'd called her a delivery girl. She pulled out her laptop, fingers moving on autopilot. Tae-hyun had been in the penthouse all week, connected to their network. If he was planning something, there would be traces. She found it in the packet logs, encrypted messages, carefully hidden but not carefully enough, data being transmitted to an external source. The signal bounced through proxies, but Eva had gotten very good at tracing signals. The destination address made her blood freeze. FBI Field Office, Seattle Division. Tae-hyun wasn't just arguing against the operation. He was selling them out. Eva's mind raced. She could tell Yujun, should tell Yujun. But they were an hour from launching the assault. And if she revealed Tae-hyun's betrayal now, it would throw everything into chaos. Yujun would confront his brother. Time would be wasted. Leo would die. She needed to handle this herself. Eva pulled up a different program, one she'd designed 2 weeks ago as insurance, never imagining she'd need it. Medical device interface protocols. She'd hacked the penthouse security system on day 3, learned that Tae-hyun had a pacemaker, installed 5 years ago after a heart attack. Modern pacemakers ran on Bluetooth, and Bluetooth could be hacked. Eva's fingers flew across the keyboard. It took her 8 minutes to breach Tae-hyun's pacemaker's security. Another 4 to establish control. The device reported back healthy rhythms. 130 beats per minute. Elevated. Stressed. She wrote a simple override, a kill switch. Then she saved it and stood. Taehyun was in the kitchen, pouring whiskey with shaking hands. His phone sat on the counter, screen dark but probably still transmitting their location to the FBI. Eva walked up behind him, silent as smoke. "You should be more careful with your medical devices," she said softly. Taehyun spun around, whiskey sloshing. "What?" Eva held up her phone. On screen, his pacemaker's readout pulsed steadily. "I just set your heart rate to manual control. Right now, your pacemaker is taking orders from me, not your body. If I tell it to stop, it stops. If I tell it to spike to 300 beats per minute, it does. You'll be dead before you hit the floor." The color drained from Taehyun's face. "You're bluffing." Eva tapped her screen. His pacemaker jumped to 180 beats per minute. Taehyun gasped, his hand flying to his chest. Sweat broke out on his forehead. "Stop." She tapped again, back to 130. "I know you're feeding our location to the FBI," Eva said calmly. "I know you want your brother dead so you can take his empire. And I know that if I tell Yoojun, he'll kill you himself. But we don't have time for that right now." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something cold and absolute. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit in this penthouse and do exactly nothing. You're not going to call anyone. You're not going to send any more messages. You're not going to warn the FBI or Vane or anyone else about our assault. And if I even suspect you've betrayed us," she held up her phone, "I turn you off, understand?" Taehyun stared at her with pure hatred. "You can't." "Scream, and I'll do it right now," Eva interrupted. "Test me, see what happens." For a long moment, they stood there, predator and prey reversed. Then Taehyun's shoulders slumped in defeat. "What do you want?" "Your silence, your compliance. And when this is over, you and I are going to have a conversation with Yoojun about loyalty." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Oh, and Taehyun? If anything happens to Yoojun tonight, if he dies, if he's captured, if he's even slightly more injured than he already is, your pacemaker will interpret it as a fatal arrhythmia, automatic, irreversible. So pray we all come home safe." She forced him into the panic room down the hall, engaging the biometric lock that only Yoojun could open. "Sit tight," she whispered through the glass. "And pray we come back." She left him pounding on the reinforced door and went to tell Yoojun they were ready. The assault team loaded into 3 vehicles an hour later. Black vans, armored, windows tinted dark enough to hide sin. Eva rode in the lead van with Yoojun, her laptop balanced on her knees, already hacking into the prison's external systems. Park Jin-ho drove. Kwon and Min sat in back, checking weapons with the casual efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times. Yoojun sat beside Eva, his wounded shoulder bound tightly beneath his tactical vest. He'd been quiet since they left the penthouse, his focus absolute. "The HVAC system is our entry point," Eva said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I can override the gas delivery, flood their corridors with knockout gas. It'll give us a 10-minute window before their backup systems activate." "And Leo?" "Cell Block D, isolation wing. Vane's keeping him separated from the general population." Eva pulled up the thermal imaging. "There are guards posted outside his cell, and..." Her blood ran cold. "Yoojun, look at this." She turned the laptop toward him. The thermal image showed Leo's cell, but the ventilation system glowed bright red. Active. Pumping something into the space at a rate far higher than normal. "Vane's venting the oxygen," Yoojun said quietly. "He knows we're coming." "How?" Eva demanded. "We were careful. We didn't..." Then she understood. "Taehyun. He must have gotten a message out before I stopped him." Yoojun's expression went absolutely cold. "How long does Leo have?" Eva ran the calculations, her heart sinking. "At that ventilation rate, 20 minutes. Maybe 30 if he stays calm and conserves oxygen. Then we have 20 minutes. Yoojun spoke into his comm. "All teams, we're going loud. Standard breach protocols. Park, get us to the north wall. Eva, you're staying in the van." "What?" "No. You're staying in the van," Yoojun repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You'll hack the HVAC from here. restore oxygen to Leo's cell, and guide us through their security. That's your job. Mine is to get your brother out alive. The van screeched to a halt outside the prison's northern perimeter. Razor wire gleamed in the darkness. Spotlights swept the grounds. Guard towers loomed like sentinels. Yoojun looked at Eva one last time. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek in a gesture that was becoming dangerously familiar. "If anything happens," he started. "Nothing's going to happen," Eva interrupted fiercely. "You're going to get Leo, and you're going to come back, and we're going to make Vane pay for every second of this." Yoojun's smile was sharp enough to cut. "That's my girl." Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness with Park Jin-ho and the assault team, leaving Eva alone in the van with her laptop and the crushing weight of 20 lives depending on her skills. She cracked her knuckles and started typing. The prison's security system was sophisticated, but Eva had been preparing for this all week. She slipped through their firewalls like smoke, found the HVAC controls, and froze. Someone had changed the access codes. New encryption, military grade. Vane had been expecting her. Eva's hands shook. Outside, she could hear gunfire, shouting. The assault had started. The clock was ticking. Leo was suffocating, and she couldn't get in. "Come on," she whispered to the screen. "Come on, come on." She tried every back door she knew, every exploit, every trick she'd learned at MIT and taught herself in the years after. Nothing worked. Then she remembered something. The original architecture. The code she'd written 3 years ago. The system might have new security, but the core structure was still hers. She stopped trying to break in. Instead, she spoke to it. Eva pulled up the command line and typed in the activation phrase she'd coded into her original thesis, the signature that would identify her as the system's creator. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the screen flooded green. Creator recognized. Awaiting command. Eva almost sobbed with relief. Restore ventilation to cell block D, isolation wing. Emergency oxygen protocol. Now. Command accepted. On the thermal imaging, she watched the red glow in Leo's cell shift to blue. Oxygen flooding back in. She'd done it. Yoojun. She spoke into the comm. Oxygen restored. Leo's cell is clear. Go get him. Copy. Yoojun's voice was tight, breathless. She could hear gunfire in the background. We're 30 seconds out. Eva watched the thermal imaging, her heart in her throat. Yoojun's team moved through the corridors like ghosts, taking down guards with brutal efficiency. They reached the isolation wing, the cell door. Then everything went to hell. Alarms screamed through the prison. Red lights flooded the corridors. And on Eva's screen, she watched as 50 thermal signatures converged on Yoojun's position. SWAT team, full tactical response. Yoojun, Eva screamed into the comm. You've got 50 hostiles incoming from the east wing. I see them. His voice was preternaturally calm. Eva, I need you to lock down the east corridor. Buy us time. Eva's fingers flew. She triggered every security door between the SWAT team and Yoojun's position. Emergency lockdown. It would hold them for maybe 3 minutes. On screen, she watched Yoojun's team grab Leo, a limp thermal signature, barely conscious, and start moving back the way they came. But the SWAT team was breaking through her locks, and more signatures were appearing, converging, cutting off their escape. Yoojun, you're surrounded. I know. He sounded almost amused. Eva, remember when I said I don't let go of what's mine? Yes, I meant it. Whatever happens, you did everything right. This was always going to be the hard part. Don't you dare, Eva whispered, tears streaming down her face. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself. The sound of an explosion cut through the comm, then static, then silence. Yoojun? Eva's voice cracked. Yoojun? Nothing. The thermal imaging showed chaos. Fire, smoke, signatures scattering, and in the center of it all, 3 figures moving toward the extraction point. Eva held her breath, waiting, praying to any god that would listen. The van door burst open. Park Jin-ho stumbled in, supporting Leo's weight. Behind them, covered in soot and blood, came Yujun. Alive, Eva launched herself at him, and he caught her with his good arm, pulling her against his chest hard enough to bruise. "I'm here," he murmured into her hair. "I'm here. We're all here." The van peeled away from the prison, sirens wailing behind them, and Eva clung to Yujun like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to crumble. In the back, Leo was breathing, alive, free, and for the first time in 5 years, Eva let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The penthouse elevator opened to silence. Wrong kind of silence. The kind that made Eva's skin crawl, that set off every alarm bell her 2 weeks in Yujun's world had taught her to recognize. Park Jin-ho noticed it too. His hand went to his weapon immediately, his body shifting to shield Yujun and Leo as they stumbled out. The assault had cost them. Yujun's shoulder was bleeding through the fresh bandages. Leo was barely conscious, supported between Kwon and Min, but they were alive. They'd made it out. Eva stepped into the penthouse and felt it immediately. The air was wrong, too still. The usual hum of the server room was missing, replaced by a high-pitched whine that made her teeth ache. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Yujun's hand caught her wrist, pulling her behind him. His gun was already drawn, pain forgotten in the face of immediate threat. He gestured to his men, silent hand signals that sent them fanning out across the space. The door to the panic room had been drilled out. Sparks showered from the destroyed keypad, and the heavy steel door hung ajar. The server room doors stood open. Inside, surrounded by the glow of monitors and the pulse of machines that ran an empire, stood Lim Tae-hyun. He'd positioned himself perfectly. Back to the wall, gun in one hand, the other resting on the main server stack, and strapped to his chest, clearly visible even from the doorway, was enough C4 to turn the entire penthouse into rubble. "Hello, brother," Tae-hyun said. His voice was steady, but sweat gleamed on his forehead. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it back. That would have been disappointing. I wanted you to see this." Yujun moved forward slowly, his weapon trained on his brother's head. "Tae-hyun, what are you doing?" "What I should have done 5 years ago." Tae-hyun's laugh was jagged, broken. "You made me second, always second. I built half this empire with my blood, my strategies, my sacrifices, and you treat me like a servant while you play house with a delivery girl." His eyes found Eva, and the hatred in them was pure, undiluted. "Give me the encrypted keys to the offshore accounts. All of them. Transfer control to me, or I detonate these servers, and we all die, starting with her." The gun shifted, pointing directly at Eva's chest. Park Jin-ho moved instantly, but Yujun's hand stopped him. "Stand down." "Yujun," Eva started. "Quiet." Yujun's voice was soft, lethal. He walked forward, putting himself between Eva and the gun. His own weapon never wavered. "You want the keys, brother? You want my empire? Then shoot me. Take it. But understand that the moment you pull that trigger, Park Jin-ho puts 3 rounds in your skull. You'll be dead before I hit the ground." "I'm already dead," Tae-hyun spat. "The FBI knows about this place, about our operations. I gave them everything in exchange for immunity. They'll be here in 20 minutes. So either you give me those keys, and I disappear with enough money to never be found, or we all burn together." The server room felt smaller suddenly, tighter. The whine of the machines was getting louder, and Eva realized with horror that Tae-hyun had already started a cascade failure. The servers were overheating, the cooling system disabled. "You sold us out to the FBI," Yujun said quietly. Not a question. A confirmation of something he'd already suspected. "You betrayed your own blood." "You betrayed me first," Tae-hyun's voice cracked. "When you brought her here, when you gave her access to everything I'd built, when you looked at her like—" He stopped, breathing hard. "She made you weak. The great demon of Seattle, brought to his knees by a girl in a delivery uniform." Yujun smiled then. It was a terrible smile, beautiful and cold and absolutely certain. "She made me invincible." He glanced at Eva over his shoulder. Their eyes met, and in that moment, An entire conversation happened in silence. She saw the question, the trust, the absolute faith that she would understand what he needed. Eva's hand went to her phone. She'd written the surge protocol 2 weeks ago as a failsafe, a way to overload specific server sections if they were ever compromised. She'd never told anyone about it, not even June, but he knew. Somehow, he knew she'd have a contingency, that she'd be prepared for exactly this kind of betrayal. Eva pulled up the command, her fingers steady despite the gun pointed at her chest. She found the server rack directly to Taehyun's left, the one marked Red 7, the one that handled their most sensitive data. She looked at Jun and nodded once. Jun's voice was soft, almost gentle. "You should have taken the money when I offered it, brother. You should have walked away." Then he stepped aside. Eva executed the command. Red 7 exploded. Not with fire, with electricity. A massive surge of power that overloaded every circuit, every capacitor, every connection in a cascading chain reaction. Sparks erupted like fireworks. The smell of burning electronics and ozone filled the air instantly. Taehyun screamed, his hands flying up to protect his face. The explosion blinded him. The bright flash leaving after images burned into his retinas. Jun moved. One shot. Clean. Professional. The bullet took Taehyun between the eyes before he'd even lowered his hands. The body crumpled. The dead man switch on the C4 failing to trigger because Eva had already disabled it remotely, had hacked his detonator the moment she'd seen it. The server room went quiet except for the crackling of dying electronics, and the smell, ozone and gunpowder, and something copper that was definitely blood. Jun lowered his weapon slowly. He looked at the body of his brother, at the man who'd shared his blood and his empire and ultimately chosen betrayal. His expression was unreadable. Not grief, not satisfaction. Just a terrible, cold finality. He dropped the gun, turned to Eva. "Now," he said quietly, "we are clean." Eva's legs gave out. She didn't fall. Jun caught her, his good arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her against him. She could feel his heart beating, steady and strong despite the violence, despite the pain, despite the fact that he'd just killed his own brother without hesitation. "You knew," she whispered against his chest. "You knew I had a failsafe. I trusted you to have one." His hand came up to cradle the back of her head, fingers tangling in her braids. "I trust you with my life, Eva. With my empire. With everything." Behind them, Park Jin-ho was already coordinating cleanup. Kwon and Min were getting Leo to the medical suite. The body would be dealt with. The servers would be salvaged. The FBI would arrive to find an empty building, all evidence sanitized. But in that moment, standing in the ruins of the server room with smoke curling around them and death at their feet, Eva and Jun existed in a bubble of something that felt dangerously close to love. 3 hours later, Leo was conscious. Eva sat beside his bed in the penthouse's medical suite, holding his hand while their mother's face smiled at them from a photo on the nightstand. Leo looked fragile against the white sheets, his leg in a cast, IV drip feeding him fluids and antibiotics. But he was alive, free, here. "You're really working for him," Leo said. His voice was rough from disuse, from screaming in that prison cell while oxygen bled away. "The demon of Seattle. I work with him." Eva corrected quietly. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Leo's eyes, so like hers, warm brown and too knowing, searched her face. "Eva, this isn't you. This world, this violence, this..." He gestured weakly at the opulent room. "This isn't what I sacrificed everything for. I wanted you to have a better life, not to become a criminal." Eva's throat tightened. "You don't get to make that choice for me anymore, Leo. You gave up that right when you sold weapons code to murderers." Leo flinched, like she'd slapped him. "I know what you did," Eva continued, her voice soft but unyielding. "I know about the money, about the 17 people who died, about the deal you made to pay my tuition." She squeezed his hand. "You sacrificed your soul for me. Now let me save mine my own way." Before Leo could respond, alarms screamed through the penthouse. Not security alarms, something else. Eva's phone lit up with emergency alerts, Message after message flooding in. Citywide power failure. Hospitals affected. Emergency services compromised. Her blood turned to ice. The phone rang. Unknown number. Eva answered, already knowing who it would be. "Hello, Eva." Silas Vane's voice was smooth, cultured, utterly calm despite the chaos he'd just unleashed. "I hope your reunion with your brother was sweet. Because it's about to end very badly. What did you do?" Eva was already moving, leaving Leo's room, running toward the server room where Eugene stood directing repairs. "I activated a kill switch in Seattle's power grid." Vane's voice remained pleasant, but with a hard edge. "My bank accounts might be empty, but my government clearance is still active for another hour. That's all the time I need," Vane replied pleasantly. "Right now, 15 hospitals across the city are running on backup generators that will fail in approximately 45 minutes. Thousands of patients, including your mother at Harborview Medical, will die. ICUs, surgical suites, dialysis machines, all of it, dead." Eva's world tilted. Her mother, on life support, dependent on machines that were about to fail. "What do you want?" "I want what you stole from me. Your brother. Your skills. My operation. You destroyed 3 years of work when you broke Leo out." Vane's voice hardened. "So here's your choice, Eva. You upload a virus to Lim Yujune's financial accounts. Every dollar, every asset. You burn his empire to the ground. Or I let those hospitals go dark, and everyone, including your mother, dies screaming. You can't." "I can and I will." Vane's certainty was absolute. "You have 30 minutes to decide." "Tick-tock, Eva. How much is your soul worth?" The line went dead. Eva stood frozen in the server room doorway, her phone still pressed to her ear. Eugene looked up from the damaged servers, saw her face, and crossed to her in 3 strides. "What happened?" End quote. Eva told him. Every word, every terrible choice Vane was offering. Eugene's expression went cold, not angry, colder than anger. Like something inside him had crystallized into diamond-hard purpose. "Show me." Eva pulled up the city power grid on her laptop. The damage was surgical, specific. Vane had targeted critical infrastructure with the precision of someone who'd been planning this for months. Hospitals, emergency services, the exact systems that couldn't be quickly rerouted or fixed. "I can't stop it," Eva whispered. "The kill switch is isolated. I'd need physical access to the control station, and that's in a government building with military-grade security. I'd never get in before your mother dies," Eugene finished quietly. Eva's hands shook. She looked at him. This man who'd caught her when she fell, who'd taken a bullet meant for her, who'd burned his own empire to keep her brother alive. "I have to do it," she said. "I have to delete your accounts. I don't have a choice." Eugene moved closer, his presence overwhelming. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "There's always a choice, Eva. But I won't make it for you. This is yours to decide. Your mother's life, or my empire. Choose." Tears streamed down Eva's face. "I can't." "Yes, you can." His thumb wiped away her tears. "I've asked you to sacrifice everything for me. Your freedom, your morals, your future. If I'm not willing to sacrifice money for your family, then I'm not worthy of you." He moved to her console, pulled up his encrypted accounts. $10 billion. The foundation of everything he'd built. Then he typed in the first 7 digits of the master password. "The last 5 digits are the date we met," he said quietly. "Delete it all. Burn it down. Save your mother." Eva's vision blurred. "Eugene, do it." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Money is just paper. Power is just a game. But you..." His voice cracked, just slightly. "You're real. Your mother is real. Your brother is real. Choose them. Always choose them." Eva's fingers moved across the keyboard. She entered the final password digits. October 15th. The night she'd walked into his fortress with spicy noodles and accidentally saved his empire. The deletion protocol loaded. 1 button, 1 choice. $10 billion or her mother's life. She pressed it. The screens flooded red. Transfer initiated. Deletion in progress. Eva's phone rang immediately. Vain, triumphant. Smart choice. Downloading the data now. Your mother gets to live another day, and I get to watch the demon of Seattle fall. The call ended. Eva collapsed into her chair, sobbing, watching $10 billion evaporate from Yujun's accounts. Watching everything he'd built for years disappear in cascading deletions. Yujun stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, steady and warm and absolutely certain. You did the right thing. I destroyed you, Eva whispered. No. His hand tightened. You saved what matters. We can rebuild money. We can't rebuild your mother. On screen, the deletion completed. Zero balance. Every account empty. Eva's phone pinged. Hospital systems coming back online. Her mother stable. Crisis averted. She should have felt relief. Should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt numb, hollow, like she'd just carved out a piece of herself and fed it to a monster. Then Yujun's phone buzzed. A message from his financial team. Confused, urgent. Eva looked up at him, saw something shift in his expression. Not panic, not anger, something else. Understanding. Eva, he said slowly. Check Vane's server activity. She did. Pulled up the trace she'd been running in the background. Watched as Vane downloaded the deleted financial data to his private government servers. Then she saw it. The file size was wrong. Too large. The deletion data should have been simple, clean, but Vane had downloaded something else embedded in the code. Eva's hands flew across the keyboard. She pulled up the hidden payload she'd written 3 weeks ago, disguised in the financial protocols, waiting for exactly this moment. A Trojan horse. The money file wasn't just data, it was a tracker, a virus. A complete exposure package that contained every illegal transaction Vane had ever made. Every bribe, every blackmail, every prisoner he'd exploited. Terabytes of evidence, all self-extracting the moment it hit his secure servers. Eva stopped crying. A smile spread across her face. Cold, calculating, terrifying. The kind of smile she'd learned from watching Yujun destroy his enemies with code and cruelty. He took the bait, she whispered. Yujun's hand slid from her shoulder to her neck, his thumb tracing her pulse point. You beautiful, brilliant, vicious creature. You planned this. We planned this. Eva looked up at him, saw the pride in his eyes, the savage satisfaction. The night we talked about Vane. You knew he'd make me choose. You knew he'd try to take everything. So we gave him exactly what he wanted. And he infected his own servers with the evidence of his crimes. Yujun's smile matched hers now. 2 predators who'd just closed a trap. How long until it extracts? It's already extracting. Eva pulled up the server logs. In approximately 4 minutes, every news outlet in the country will receive an anonymous package detailing Vane's entire operation. The prison labor, the human trafficking, the bribes to judges, prosecutors, politicians, everything. She stood, turning to face Yujun fully. The money was never deleted. It's in cold storage, encrypted under my personal access codes. I moved it the moment you gave me the password. Vane downloaded empty accounts and a virus that will end his career, his freedom, and his life. You burned my empire to save your mother and destroy Vane simultaneously. Yujun's voice was full of dark wonder. You gambled everything on your own brilliance. No. Eva reached up, her hand cupping his face the way he'd done to her so many times. I gambled on us, on the fact that you'd trust me to do exactly what needed to be done, even when it looked like I was betraying you. Yujun pulled her against him, his mouth crashing down on hers. The kiss was desperate, claiming, full of violence and devotion, and something that felt like falling and flying simultaneously. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eva's phone was ringing again. Vane. She answered, putting it on speaker. You. His voice was pure rage, pure terror. What did you do? What did you... My servers are... Everything is... Infected, Eva finished calmly. With the truth. By now, Every law enforcement agency in the country has received your complete file. You're done, Governor. Finished. And the beautiful part? You did it to yourself. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, I'll kill you. Both of you. You'll die in the same prison where you enslaved my brother. Eva interrupted. In the same cell block, with the same guards. And every single inmate will know exactly what you did. Good luck with that. She hung up, turned to you, June. And for the first time since she'd signed her life away in this penthouse, Eva Morris smiled like she'd finally found exactly where she belonged. In the darkness, with the monsters, building empires from ash and code, and the beautiful, terrible love of a man who'd burn the world for her. The news broke at dawn. Eva and Eugene sat on the floor of the empty server room, surrounded by the husks of damaged equipment and the lingering smell of burned circuits. Between them, a grease-stained bag of takeout noodles, the same kind she delivered that first night, a lifetime ago. On the monitor wall, every major news network showed the same image: Silas Vane in handcuffs, being perp-walked out of his mansion, while reporters screamed questions he wouldn't answer. Former Tech Governor Silas Vane arrested on charges of human trafficking, racketeering, and corruption. Sources say the evidence includes detailed financial records and testimony from dozens of inmates forced to work in illegal cyber operations. Eva watched the man who'd tried to destroy her crumble on live television. She should have felt vindicated, victorious. Instead, she felt tired, hollowed out, like she'd walked through fire and emerged on the other side as someone she didn't quite recognize. Eugene's hand found hers between them, his fingers interlacing with hers. He didn't speak, didn't need to. They'd spent the last 3 hours in silence, rebuilding what Tae-hyun had tried to destroy, restoring systems, covering tracks, being what they'd become together. Partners, equals, something more dangerous than either of them alone. Where will they send him? Eva asked quietly. Eugene's smile was sharp as a blade. I made some calls. He won't be placed in protective custody. He's going to general population. Eva turned to look at him, understanding dawning. The same prison, where he enslaved your brother, where he tortured inmates for labor, where every single prisoner knows exactly what he did. Eugene's voice was soft, lethal. He'll last maybe a week, maybe less. Justice isn't always about courtrooms and trials, Eva. Sometimes it's about putting monsters in cages with the people they created. It should have horrified her. Should have made her recoil from the casual cruelty, the calculated revenge. Instead, Eva squeezed his hand tighter. They finished the noodles in silence. Watched the sun rise over Seattle, washing the rain-soaked city in gold and blood-red light. Watched their enemy fall. Watched the world shift beneath their feet. Then Eugene stood. He disappeared into his office for a moment, returned with 2 items. A passport, brand new French, with Eva's face but a different name, Claire Dubois, complete with entry stamps, a history, a life that existed only on paper but would hold up under any scrutiny, and a check, $50 million, made out to Eva Morris. Signed with Eugene's distinctive slash of black ink. He held them out to her. You're free, he said quietly. Leo is safe. Your mother's medical bills are paid through a trust that can never be traced back to me. You've served your contract, saved my empire, destroyed my enemies. His gray eyes held hers, steady and unreadable. Take these. Disappear. Start the life your brother killed for you to have. Eva stared at the passport and check like they were venomous. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The escape clause. The exit she'd demanded he write into their contract. Freedom, safety, everything she'd thought she wanted when she'd signed her life away to the demon of Seattle. She stood slowly, took the passport and check from his hands, felt the weight of them, paper and possibility, and the clean slate she'd been chasing for 5 years. Then she looked at Eugene, really looked at him. He was giving her freedom because he'd promised, because he was a man who kept his word, even when it destroyed him, even when she could see in the tension of his jaw, the careful blankness of his expression, that letting her go was costing him everything. Eva walked to the window. The rain had finally stopped. Seattle stretched below them, the city they'd bled for, fought for, nearly died for. The rain was washing it clean, making it new. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 weeks ago, exhausted, invisible, delivering noodles to people who never saw her. That girl had wanted escape, had wanted safety and normalcy, and a life without violence. But that girl had died in this penthouse, had been reborn in silken code and the dangerous devotion of a monster who'd stepped in front of a bullet for her. Eva turned, looked at Yujun standing in the ruins of his server room, wounded and deadly and absolutely certain he was doing the right thing by letting her go. She walked to him, met his eyes, and tore the check in half. The sound of ripping paper was loud in the silent room. Yujun's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Hope, fear, wonder. Eva dropped the pieces, watched them flutter to the floor like dead leaves. Then she walked to his desk. The massive black thing that commanded the room, that represented power and empire and everything Yujun had built from blood and brilliance. She sat in his chair. The leather was still warm from his body. The monitors showed their empire, servers humming back to life. Money flowing, operations running, the city below, theirs for the taking. Eva looked up at Yujun, standing frozen by the window, and smiled. It was the smile she'd learned from him. Cold, certain, absolutely terrifying. "I don't want to run," she said quietly. "I want to rule." For 3 heartbeats, Yujun didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he smiled. A real smile. Not the predator's baring of teeth she'd seen before. Not the calculated expression he wore for his enemies. A genuine smile that transformed his face from demon to something devastatingly human. He crossed to her. Slowly, deliberately, like he was approaching something sacred. When he reached the desk, he moved behind the chair. Behind her. His hand came down on her shoulder, warm and possessive and absolutely certain. His ring, the black titanium one he always wore, clicked against the leather. "Long live the Queen," he murmured. His other hand came up, tangling in her braids, tilting her head back until she was looking up at him. The position was vulnerable, trusting, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with bodies and everything to do with souls laid bare. "You understand what this means?" Yujun asked softly. "What you're choosing. There's no going back, Eva. No escape, no clean slate. You'll be mine and I'll be yours, and we'll build empires from ashes and burn down anyone who tries to stop us." Eva reached up, her hand covering his on her shoulder. "I know exactly what I'm choosing. You, this, us, the darkness and the power and the terrible, beautiful violence of loving a monster who taught me how to be one too." Yujun leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "Then welcome home, my queen. Let's burn the world together." The kiss was slow this time, deep, full of promise and possession, and the kind of devotion that transcended morality, that existed in the space between right and wrong, where only they lived. When they broke apart, Seattle sprawled below them, washed clean by rain and ready for conquest. Eva Morris, former MIT prodigy, former delivery girl, former invisible nobody, sat in the throne of the demon of Seattle and smiled like a woman who'd finally found exactly where she belonged. In the darkness, in the violence, in the arms of a monster who'd burned his empire for her and received a queen in return. The screens flickered to life around them, showing the empire they'd built together, the power they'd seized, the future they'd claimed with blood and code, and the kind of love that didn't ask for redemption because it had never wanted to be saved. Outside, the sun rose over their city. Inside, the king and queen of Seattle's underworld began to plan their next conquest. Together, always together.